ask you something. Are you interested in languages? I know I am, but not everybody is interested in learning, speaking, communicating in another language. Part of my life story is that when I was about 15 years old, about 15, 16 years old, I started getting into a lot of Japanese entertainment. Japanese games, Japanese anime, Japanese movies, a whole lot of Japanese things. And slowly and for surely, I started picking up on certain words. Now, just by watching that stuff, I wouldn't say you can actually learn how to speak the language fluently. No, not just by watching these things, but it does lay a foundation when you do that. By watching anime and playing Japanese games that are not translated into English, that are in its native Nihongo language. When you do that, like I said, starts to build a small foundation in your mind because you're still young. That's what I was. I was a teenager. And your brain's like a sponge. And if you enjoy what you're doing, if you enjoy the hobby that you're interested in, and if you're enjoying that in a different language, then slowly some of these words are going to click. They're going to stick, especially if you're using subtitles as far as movies or anime. For me, like I said in the past, I was a huge Dragon Ball fan. And some of my close friends were into Dragon Ball. Now, back in the past, Dragon Ball Z was not released in America. So the vast majority of people in my age bracket back then wasn't even familiar with Dragon Ball. They didn't even know what it was. But I did. Because I was following the series through a bootleg market. Back then, there were certain stores you can go to that were getting bootleg movies and stuff like that. So it was always very easy to watch certain anime in the store on the TV screen. And that's what I used to do. I used to watch these series that I never heard of. They're all speaking in Japanese, but they have subtitles. There used to also be stores that used to sell import games from Japan. And a lot of the games always fascinated me because it was different. So for me, learning a second language was a whole lot of fun. And I suggest, if you want, pick a language. A language that is exciting to you. And then start watching movies in that language. If you can play games in that language, do that too. Because slowly, you're going to build a small foundation in your mind of another language. Now, what else did I do? Well, I went to school. I went to school that taught me Japanese. Now, there are some schools that will teach you a language that you are interested in. But most schools in America, they only offer German or French or Spanish. But a lot of American schools don't offer Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Amharic. Amharic is an Ethiopian language, by the way. But a lot of American schools don't even offer these exotic languages. That's where you have to do your research, like I did. You have to find a school that's in your city that will teach you another language by a native speaker. When I started going to school for Japanese, I learned the language from a native speaker. A very sweet Japanese woman. And she was very, very humble and very, very polite and extremely patient. She was extremely patient with me. And I learned a whole lot from her. I learned the grammar. I learned how to properly speak it. I learned how to read it. Because reading Japanese, at least in my opinion, is a little bit easier than Chinese, even though the Chinese and the Japanese are sharing certain letters or symbols, okay? Those symbols are called kanji. But, of course, there's a huge story behind why that is that I'm not getting into, but it involves some drama, of course. However, they're sharing certain kanjis. But the Chinese have way more kanji or symbols than the Japanese do, which makes, in my opinion, Chinese to be the harder language to learn how to read and also to speak to. But that's neither here nor there. If you want to learn a language, right, you can do it. And it is a lot of fun. Because for me, learning Japanese was a lot of fun. Also, I would stress getting involved in the culture. Here in my hometown, there are Sakura festivals that take place usually around March. There's also, thank goodness, there's Japanese museums in my town that American people can go to. The Japanese museum, you can go to the Japanese house. You can, and these things are set up to where it's just basically like you're in Japan. The way the houses are set up in the museum place is that it looked like you're in an actual Japanese house from Kyoto. So it's a lot of fun for me because I'm already into that type of culture and language, and you know, it just excites me. But whatever language excites you, whatever culture floats your boat, get into it, because if you want to learn a second language, that is a good way of building a foundation in your mind. Because it's like clicking on a switch that has never been clicked on in your mind. When you are able to put another language in your mind and to be able to think in that language and speak in that language, it's kind of like an opening in your mind. Because most of us Americans only speak one language. Because a lot of us think that that's all we need to know. And I mean, that could be true as far as being in this country. Maybe that's all you might need to know. Although I'm just thinking in my mind that Spanish and Chinese are two languages that is on the rise in America. So being able to speak a second language, probably one of those two languages, would open up a whole lot of doors for you. So just give it a chance. If you're into that stuff, you'll pick up on the language pretty easy. Well, this is Amin Par.